Regent Otterkirk, would you please lead us in a moment of reflection?
Thank you, Chancellor. I will happily do that, and I apologize in advance because what I'm going to reflect on is going to take a few minutes this morning. I had a wonderful experience weekend before last, and I was able to join the Hispanic Puerto Rican Youth Leadership Institute, whose theme this year happened to be advocacy through the arts. Absolutely incredible. I kind of wore this top today because it reflects what I'm going to talk about. I joined 200 young people from across high schools in New York State at the Radisson, and they taught me so much. And they lifted me from all of the other negatives that are tugging at all of us. And they took the arts and wove such an incredible presentation, I couldn't believe it. The 200 students were divided into 3 groups. One was to deal with dance, one with the visual, and one with the performing. And they all performed, trust me. Something drew me into the dance group. 70 young people in a fairly large room, but that's a lot of students in one classroom. There was the most talented professional dancer I've seen in a long time. And it wasn't just her dancing that was so great. She was a human being that knew how to open doors and encourage the students to talk about their experiences. And from that, and they did talk, from that they identified at her request 3 areas of concern right now. Interestingly, they picked immigration, racism, and cultural diversity. And I thought, wow, we're going to do this through dance? Oh my God, folks, I wish you all could have been there. She had them on the floor. She had them up moving. She had them sharing their personal experiences, which were stories that you may have heard yourself. And I watched. And she got them to talk about each of those 3 areas, and then she said, can we select an overarching theme? And of course they picked cultural diversity because the other things are included therein. Then she had them sit on the floor. Then she had them get up and start moving. Then she started talking about that in the end, they were going to choreograph their topic. I said, we are? I thought, oh, wow, I can't wait to see this. Those young people just opened up, and they were every shade of black, brown, and white, all mixed in a room. And I was proudly there with a group of 8 students from the North Country that don't get to see that much diversity, sometimes in a year, much less in a day. And she had them go through all sorts of activities where they swayed, where they moved forward, where they moved backward, when they bent down. She had the group divide into 3 sections. One kind of represented the American, sometimes known as the ugly American. One represented a diverse group, and then there was this 3rd group that represented new people, immigration, folks coming into our country and feeling the tug and pull and tug and pull. Now, if I said that enough times, you'd start to feel what she did with them. And the 2 groups in the corners would pull and lean back, and the group in the middle would start to go that way, and then the Americans over here would pull them that way. And it was such a visual of what our youth are experiencing as well as our adults. But it was such an incredible experience. And in the evening, when each of the other groups joined us and performed, she asked the students to stand up and share any reflections they had. Their statements were powerful, absolutely powerful. Then I felt moved to join the students, and I asked if I could say something for a few minutes. And when the students got up, they said, I'm a senior. So when I got up, I said, I'm a senior too. Got the same reaction from them. And I said, thank you, thank you, thank you. You have given me hope that I couldn't find anyplace else. There is a future for America. It's not going to be easy, but when you can take and appreciate the arts and end up sending the message that was present here in these rooms today, it's wonderful. And I thank them. I said, this is beautiful, and I'm so thankful, Gladys again, for being a part of it. So that was the reflection I wanted to share with you. I've had a lot of experiences like this visiting our schools across the North Country, which is a bit of an expanse, but this is one of the top, and I wanted to share that with you. We can be led by the children again. Thank you.
Amen. Oh, there you go.
There you go, is right. That was perfect.
Yes, it was.
Well, good morning, everyone, again. As you know, we have absolutely weathered February, March, all the storms, and we are finally looking at a spring day. And it's a reminder that in many of our lives, we have gone through some of these storms and some of these times of uncertainty. But the beauty of it is that no matter how challenging and difficult it gets, spring will always arrive. So I welcome all of you on this day that is starting to look like spring is around the corner. At this moment, I'd like to, first and foremost, give a warm welcome to our new member, Suzanne Mittler, to the board. And Regent Mittler represents the 6th Judicial District, a southern tier, and we welcome her and her new perspectives to the Board of Regents. Also today we have 2 students representatives from LaSalle School here in Albany. The students Gilberto Negron and PJ Washburn are the president and vice president of the LaSalle School Senate and are here with us with their history teacher, Alan Landau, and school leaders and board members. We welcome them, and we hope that they too will be a part of the fabric of making history in our wonderful state. By the way, the reason they are very interested in the issues of government, as we all are, and as we move forward, we understand that these are times when people do share differences, but we must do them in a respectful kind of way, and at the same time understand that differences sometimes bring about strength and bring about diverse ideas and bring about opportunities. So let's take those differences and turn them into positive opportunities to strengthen the work that all of us are engaged in.
Chancellor, I just want to mention that the second day of the Institute was the mock assembly, which was incredible. Maybe we should add them to what's going on across the street now.
Thank you, Regent Odekirk. And that certainly was, the commissioner was there and spoke to the young people as the keynote speaker, and we really did have an opportunity to share and debate some challenging issues around the immigration and some other respective situations. And these young people did it with dignity, respect, and elegance. So I know that we as a board are very proud of these young people and the kind of work that they have been encouraged to do for their communities and our state. So I want to publicly acknowledge them. I want to publicly acknowledge all the hard work that Gladys Cruz and the students who took part in that wonderful weekend. Thank you. Executive session motion, Vice Chancellor.
Madam Chancellor, colleagues, good morning. I'd like to move at this time that the Board of Regents convene an executive session Monday, April 3rd, later today at 4:45 p.m. to discuss personnel matters.
Thank you, Vice Chancellor. Do I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. This morning, we are going to ask Commissioner to talk about Regent Otakirk introduced the work that was done during the Summer's Leadership Student. And this morning, we are very much going to engage in looking at the New York State plan for the arts. And at this time, I would like to turn it over to our Commissioner.
Thank you, Chancellor. I think it was so appropriate when Regent Otakirk went into that description of the work that was done and reflections on very, very serious, deep topics, when students take the time to think about that and to see that in ways that we don't normally think students are going to be involved in, but we wish they were. And so we have today the statewide strategic plan for the arts, related to dance, music, theater, visual, and media arts. And this morning, Angelica will be discussing this as we move forward. And then we're going to go through this short presentation and then open it up for a longer conversation. I want to point out and reflect back on our workshop last week. And in there, if you remember, the arts came up as a way that we somehow want to include arts and arts education and an extension of that across the K-12 curriculum in our plan for our ESSA plan for the state of New York. And so I think it's very timely that we're here and can talk about this. So Angelica and Mary, thank you so much for your work on this.
Thank you, Commissioner. We're excited today, and what way to open up, because it really shows the power of the arts in all facets of our education system. And today we're going to talk about how we ensure that the arts are truly embedded and successful, because we are looking forward to bringing you the new state standards for the arts. But before that can happen, one of the things that we decided that was very important is that we lay out a blueprint for how it actually will be carried out and how it will be embedded in all the work and in the districts that we work with. So we're going to talk to you a little bit about what that looks like, a survey that we put out, and what feedback we've got and how we've tailored how we're going to move forward based on that feedback. So that has been very important and very powerful for us. So I'm going to give you part of what our blueprint or our strategic plan is, really having a vision and a mission that is very important for us to move forward, aside from having standards. I'm going to read to you what the mission is, because it is very powerful when you set the stage for where we're going with the arts standards for the state of New York. So the mission that we have laid out is for the New York State Coalition of Arts Education Association is to focus the statewide learning community on strengthening and enhancing arts education so that all students graduate as artistically literate citizens, ready for college and careers, and poised to participate in the global economy through a lifetime of engagement. So that's pretty powerful if we think about it. But in order for us to be successful, we thought that that's the starting point, to have a mission. And then the vision is that all New York State P-12 students are provided with access. I think we've been talking a lot about the ability for all of our schools to have access to the arts. Access to learning in dance, music, theater, visual, and media arts delivered by certified teachers employing instruction reflective of research and best practice in districts using sequential, standard-based arts curricula, along with quality resources, support from community stakeholders at large. And then we broke that up So we want to talk to you about the 4 critical components that have made up the survey that we put out, and then we're going to come back and really talk to you about what were some of the concerns that came from the survey, because there were some, and how we intend to address them.
So the 4 critical components that Angelica was discussing are standards, which we've been doing a great deal of work on with our art educators around the state. The next is professional development, and I think that that was probably the biggest concern that we hear from the state educators around curriculum, instruction, and assessment. I think that's the biggest one that really seems to be a concern and that we need to address. Materials and resource support, making sure that we have the right materials in districts, and districts have to be able to provide that support. And administrative and community support. That's critical. We have to make sure our administrators see the value of arts education in our schools and make sure that that's happening in the schools, and also the community needs to be there to support.
Right. As we move forward, you know, our New York State's art standards were developed in 1997. So it's very timely that we move. It's been 20 years before we, you know, that we've made any changes. But in 2001, the National Coalition for Core Art Standards developed their standards. And what we're hoping to do when we bring the standards is really see where we are in relationship to those standards and find any gaps, identify any gaps, and make sure that we strengthen and build our new standards. Because we want to make sure that we can't say we're at the forefront at this point, but that we're being very thoughtful about the work and that it is embedded in everything that we do. So I think that it's important for us to know that what we're going to do is a crosswalk so that we can look at the discipline content areas and create benchmarks. So that is very important for us. And one of the other important issues is making sure that we have anchor standards as we move forward, because that is really at the crux of a lot of the work that we're doing. So we've been very thoughtful. It has taken time, but we also want our students to have different pathways. And we'll talk about the sequential nature of the work that's happening.
So in the strategic plan, it's set up so that there are goals under each one of these critical components that we're going to be looking forward to doing. Under those goals, there are objectives. There are a plan to go forward, and there are activities that go under those that will really help us follow this blueprint to make sure that the standards are successfully implemented. Some of the things that are in the strategic plan, obviously, is to adopt the learning standards for the arts, develop this arts pathway assessment system processes, making sure that we support regular and substantive teaching and learning for the arts, making sure we talk about the conceptual understandings and practices through artistic inquiry and authentic engagement. Also, we feel it's important that we provide mentorships and research opportunities for teachers and students. And through these incentives, we'll be building those partnerships with the business and industry, higher institutions, and other art community members. We're also going to be looking at the Commissioner's regulations around the arts for P12, and also utilize our arts education partnerships and their resources to make sure we build some innovative programs. I think it's really important to note that this has been going on for the last 5 years, building this strategic plan and these arts partnerships. We've been working very closely with our arts educators around the state through our professional arts organizations, and this has been a great partnership. They have been so helpful in building the strategic plan and helping us to do the art standards. So they've been side by side with our department in this effort.
And I also want to identify that Regent Tillis has been very involved with the arts group that has many teachers, but not only teachers, but also practicing artists and professors from higher ed. So this all is dovetailing very well into the work that has been done through his committee and the continuing work done in the department.
Absolutely.
So this is a slide that talks about the current art standards. As Angelica said before, they're 20 years old, so it's definitely time to be doing something different. Also, I think important to note that these are the standards that go for the 4 arts areas. The new standards include media arts, which was kind of underneath the visual arts at the time. And also the standards are in elementary, grade band, intermediate, and a double for the high school. So it's a commencement level and a sequence level. If we go to the next slide, it gives you a screenshot of the new standards, which includes media arts. So it's got its own category. They're much more comprehensive than what we have now. And in the pre-K to 8, they're actually grade by grade standards, which makes it very easy for our elementary and middle school teachers to know exactly what is necessary instead of just a grade band where it could be anybody's responsibility. This gives the responsibility of those grade level teachers to look at the arts. And the high school has 3 levels. So it's much more comprehensive, and there's so many materials that go along with it, because these were from the National Core Arts Standards. We did a New York State version, just pretty much like what we did with the science standards. Well, we did NGSS, but we did a New York State version. We're doing a New York State version of the National Core Arts. So there are many resources that go along with those. So there's cornerstone assessments, there's implementation guides that will help administrators and teachers as we go forward. So much richer and much more beneficial, I believe, for our state.
So one of the other concerns that came up was actually the pathway assessment system processes. So having an assessment pathway is a concern that came up, and it's something that we've been looking at. And we have subcommittees of the arts. The Blue Ribbon Commission are currently looking to develop the arts pathway assessment system processes. And we have an acronym. I'm not going to bore you with that. But I think this is very much part of the work. And that it doesn't look just like a traditional assessment, but that it is developed with the student, with the teachers, that it starts early on. It's an early trajectory to really set a path or a course for students to be able to demonstrate how they've grown and their knowledge and ability within the arts. And when we think about the arts, having a lot of it be performance-based, right, as opposed to just traditional paper and pencil. So there's a lot of work being done in that area so that we're able to really shift what that looks like in our state. And when we start talking about pathways, which we have, that it really is a pathway and it's meaningful for the kids. So that's a big change for us. So we'd like to talk to you now about a timeline that we've set up so that we're all aware, and we're trying to stay as close as possible, but it's tentative, right? I want to keep that in everybody's mind because sometimes we want to go back and really make sure that we're on the right path. So if you look at the first in 2015-16 winters to determine core arts content, conceptual understanding, and practices required for all students. The crosswalk that I talked about earlier, making sure that we've updated our standards, changed them, found where we can move them forward. Determine the architecture standards documents. So then spring 2016, we selection of 5 teams for standards writers. And as you can see, I'm not going to read through all of them, but summer 2016, write draft standards in dance, theater, visual arts, and media arts. And like we said earlier, media arts is different for us. It's new. So spring 2017 is where we are now, right? Make sure that I'm in the right year. So we're revising the standards based on the survey review and comments. And as Mary said earlier, a lot of the comments, everybody was in favor. About 90% approved was approved on the survey. But what was of concern was definitely the assessment piece, but also the professional development. Districts are worried about the money to carry out meaningful professional development. And when you think about this area, it's very different, the professional development. It has to be dynamic, it has to be real, so that we're also looking at facilities. So this branches out into many different areas. It's not just about professional development in the standard way that we think about it, but really very deep, and also not just with higher ed, but really the community at large, the arts community at large, embedding and supporting what that looks like. So summer, we propose new learning standards to the Board of Regents for adoption, public comment, develop a rollout strategy and implementation guidance. And as we've heard in the past, we want to be very strategic and we want to have a transition period. So 17-18 is our transition year and 18-19 will be full implementation. Everyone's very excited about these standards and looking forward to actually having them be in place. Because it really changes the trajectory for our students and our teachers who have so long been looking for a different direction in this area. So we're really excited about it. And I'd like, if possible, Regent Tillis to speak a little bit about the Blue Ribbon, to tell us a little bit what's been happening there and the excitement that is around that work.
Good morning. I think we've been trying over the last couple of years to bring together the standards work and the work of the Blue Ribbon Commission for a pathway to the arts. The Blue Ribbon Commission for the Pathway to the Arts is really a misnomer because it really is talking about how do we substitute a pathway to the arts for one Regents test. This is the 4+1 that the Regents had approved. And the Blue Ribbon Commission is made up of some absolutely excellent people from around the state. People from the Eastman School, from Juilliard, from New York Philharmonic, but also teachers and people who are, it's headed by Carolyn Adams, a world famous dancer, and myself. And we've had some of the best discussions, which I think are going to relate to the standards as well. Because every time we started talking about doing an assessment for to substitute for one Regents test, people are saying on the commission that this isn't really what we want to do. If we're going to have an arts program, then, and we were talking about different kinds of assessments, everything from AP and IB to a college program to specialty schools like a Juilliard program. You're not talking about a majority of kids in the state. It certainly is not equal educational access to the programs. So therefore, we started talking about, well, how do we get equal educational access to for all the kids in the state? And in order to do that, it goes into the questions that are in the standards. PD and having programs in all the schools. And we're not talking about just the highest need schools, which in many cases don't have an art or music teacher, but we're even talking about some of the lowest need schools, which might not have a media arts or a dance person in the school. So what are the vehicles for doing that? It became a topic that our group has been talking about. We're meeting next month, and there's been a lot of work done. We've had 5 subcommittees doing different aspects of the assessment, which really is overarching to a lot of the things we have here. I can't tell you where they're going. They've talked about everything from a statewide arts assessment test, which has been in the works for many years, CGEL they call it, which any student can take, whether they've taken an arts curriculum or not, that would substitute for one of the tests. That's really not the be-all and end-all of the group. Right now, I think we've allowed IB and AP courses to suffice. We're looking at college programs. We're looking at regional programs, such as a regional high school, and therefore in certain parts of the state where it becomes difficult to do that, Long Island has a regional high school. It's the only one I know of in the state that outside of a city that has a regional high school for the arts. But we have to start looking at whether we're going to have shared teaching, in areas where there are no programs, where geographics make it difficult to have a program, to have blended virtual learning, perhaps in some places. And all of that really goes into how do we develop just that one little piece of pathway, which is the assessment portion, because we can't get there unless we know everything else. And therefore, professional development becomes essential to what we're doing. Whether or not we're going to have arts teachers in every one of the 5 areas in every school in the state becomes a very difficult path to get to. What are ways that we can get there? That's what we're looking at, and I think that's what our standards are going to demand. I can only tell you that I think the more that we as a Regents group, look into the value of what the standards are and what this Blue Ribbon Commission therefore is doing, I think we see more and more that this is no longer a frill, or it's no longer an add-on to what the curriculum should be or what we need to do in the schools. The arts have become, as Regent Odekirk has so eloquently said, such a major part of what our schools are and what our schools really need to be. The interesting thing is that not only do the arts provide a vehicle for students to communicate, to be aware of the world, if we're talking about being college and career and life ready, the arts really is part of all 3, and especially life ready, because we haven't focused too much on the social emotional pieces that we need to focus on, and the arts really are one of the key indicators of that. But as I've seen in our highest need schools, the arts are, and some other courses, phys ed and others, are the one thing that often is the reason that kids come to school. And without that they don't come to school, and if they don't come to school, they can't really perform and can't graduate. That's one of the biggest problems that we have. So the arts really do so much more than just fill the brains of the people who are taking them with very, very useful knowledge for their life and for everything else, and the creativity that it gives. But it also helps us even in what we're talking about in terms of academic success. If they are not coming to school, then they don't have the academic success. And without the arts, in many, many cases, kids don't want to come to school. This gives them something to want to come to school for. So I can't tell you, I wish if any of you can come next month, right after the Regents meeting. We will be meeting with that Blue Ribbon Task Force. I think you'll be amazed at the quality of the group. I'm awed by it every time I sit down with them, that these people really are not only experts, but passionate about what it is that we're trying to do. And we have some really excellent people. So please try to join us after, I guess it's right after the Regents meeting next month. We've had a great staff working on very, very limited resources. We have Leslie Olin, I don't know if she's here, has been doing yeoman work on the Blue Ribbon Task Force, and a lot of our members of the task force, who are professionals in the area of arts education, have been extremely helpful themselves, acting as quasi-staff, because we just don't have anybody besides Leslie and some others, very few others. But I'm excited about it. I hope you will be too after our next meeting, and try to come to that meeting.
Thank you. Regent Young, and then Regent Reyes.
First, I would just like to publicly commend my colleague, Regent Tillis, for his work on the Blue Ribbon Committee. And I would also like to commend the work of the staff on the standards. I would just, as a point of commentary, the arts, music in particular, is what turned my life around. And I guess what I'm trying to think through, the first is one of the reasons why I think the arts has such appeal to all students. It's because it's the one area where people don't prejudge. There is the notion within the arts that this is something that you can develop. So I would start there. The second point is that I'm just wondering, since we are planning the transition year in 2018, how are we, what are the recommendations regarding our budget strategies? So, for example, we had something that supported textbooks. And then when technology came into play, there was a funding stream for technology. You know, the arts play a hugely important role in the lives of young people, and I'm just wondering, is there a recommendation that will provide a funding stream for school districts regarding implementation? Because the reality is, as someone who did this, and I know lots of you have, an orchestra set of instruments is $11,000 per class, right? And when you're trying to teach youngsters to play an instrument, you know, in some places kids have to have two. They have to have one at home to practice because they must practice, and they have to have one in school because in some places, you know, they can't walk up and down with the, right? So for me, the question becomes, how are the funding strategies going to be aligned with the standards? Or have we gotten to that point?
Yes, so it's actually in critical component 3, materials and resources. One of our activities is seek funding opportunities to acquire equipment, materials, and supplies to support the development, implementation, and sustainability of P12 arts curriculum and instructional programming at the local and regional level. So it is part of what we need to do is to have that funding strategy. We've embedded in one of the activities that we as state ed have to do to move forward, to ensure the success. So thank you, I think that was perfect.
But does that, just to push this a bit, does that mean that we can, that in the next budget cycle, we should anticipate that there would be a formula?
Yes,
Yes.
that is the expectation.
And let me add to that too. I think you brought up a really important point, Regent, you know, because we've asked for, if you remember, in our budget request, a $30 million investment in staff development, teacher development, professional development. That has to do with the implementation of standards, and the standards that we'll have that are being rolled out in English language arts, mathematics. But I think one of the mistakes we made is very often we put them in containers almost and keep them separate. But arts training for teachers in elementary classrooms can be a very critical point that can be helpful in working with standards in English language arts and mathematics, etc. And so the whole idea of having funds that go specifically to address professional development with teachers is professional development with teachers where it's needed. And I think this is certainly an area where our teachers have told us they need to have help and support. The other point you brought up was the proposed transfer of funds if the school district does not use their allocation for textbooks. That funding can be transferred to other places. And one of the suggestions we would make, and I think this is an important thing for us to look at, how many districts in fact are not using it for textbooks are going to more online and access, open access materials. And if in fact they're doing that, then that allocation of funding should be available for things like training and professional development across the board. So we don't know yet whether or not that is going to move forward, but if that's the case, then that opens up some funding at districts for professional development.
Just for clarification, I would also hope that would mean that there would be a recommendation coming to the board around an arts allocation,
Yep.
specific arts allocation,
Right.
regardless of whether you use your textbook money or not. Because,
No, I'm not saying
okay,
it doesn't.
okay,
That those things, I think we have to look at different ways of funding.
Before we get to Regent Reyes, I do want to make a quick comment that one of the, a lot of times when we're in our own space, in our own time, we engage in what we call in the joy of. And a lot of times that is focused on the arts. There are times that I know, while I've been on this Board of Regents, I have called Regent Young and have said, I am listening to the Prez, which happens to be his dad, and Lady Day. So, and there's a certain joy that that I have personally experienced as a result of the work of those two individuals. So, just want to acknowledge that work, which has been inspirational. Regent Reyes?
Thank you, Chancellor. I have a few questions, and
Turn on. Oh, it's on.
I'm just being quiet because I'm under the weather.
Oh, is that it?
And I would request that we might receive some materials that you referenced, specifically the mission statement and the vision statement. To me, they're critical, and hearing them is only one of my ways of learning. Reading them is another. I'm also very grateful to Regent Tillis for his leadership and work with the Blue Ribbon Committee. And I would also like to receive a copy of the membership of the Blue Ribbon Committee. Is it in the material that we just got?
Second packet. Second packet.
Oh,
That's
it's
been
in the-
available, though.
We'll get it again
We'll-
next
we'll-
month.
Just to
No, he's talking about
answer
the
your,
list.
just to answer your question, Regent Reyes, the vision and the mission are
Yes,
here.
yeah. How about the members of the,
It's in there as well.
there as well?
Yeah, we anticipated every question.
I'm only halfway there.
All right.
My biggest point is diversity of the arts and diversity in the arts, meaning the arts of all civilizations, and unlike some of the things that I receive in the emails that suggest that there's only one that counts, which is the canon. The canon being Western European, and having
A very diverse group.
having heard and seen Yo-Yo Ma play a cello concerto recently that was written for him, and to know that people, whether they're from Asia, from Latin America, from Africa, that the arts in all their forms are not only beautiful for their own sake, they also carry the culture and the values of the diverse peoples that make up New York State and the United States of America. And so I am very concerned and solicitous to know that the Blue Ribbon Committee in fact, not only reflect that type of diversity, but also the diversity between large cultural institutions that are well endowed and smaller grassroots cultural institutions that usually are not and may not always be heard. And I lived through this in New York City now and over many years, seeing groups that came with different waves of immigrant and new Americans struggle to be heard, to be supported, and not always successfully to stay alive. And so I want to hear and see the word, and as one member of the Regents, the word partnership when it comes to not just including people from the community, but partnership. The schools that are true hubs of the community have partnerships with different organizations, local as well as the New York Museum for Natural History, etc. So that would be my almost last statement. And the last part is a copy of the new standards. Does this other package contain the actual new
No.
standards?
No.
If it doesn't, can you make sure that we all get them?
Absolutely.
So that, because that one sheet is very small. Even with my reading glasses, I can't read.
Thank you, Regent Reyes. We're going to have Regent Cottrell, Regent Cashin, Regent Finn, and we will circle back to Regent Tillis.
Well, I just think this is a tremendous effort and something that was a long time coming, and Regent Tillis should be very happy and rejoicing. The other thing I'd like to say is I think we should be specific about students with disabilities because they have to have special accommodations if they're visually impaired or hearing impaired. We also found out the other day, Regent Tillis and myself, that there's a legislative mandate to improve mental health in schools starting in 2018. This certainly could be part of that program. So it came at the appropriate time.
Yeah, that's a great point because I think you and Regent Collins made a point of making sure that there's a connection with the social, emotional, mental health, along with Regent Sia, to make sure that these intersections, in fact, are taking place. So thank you, Regent Cottrell. And now we have Regent Cashin.
Thank you, Chancellor. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you, Angelica, for your presentation. Are there high schools that specifically focus on one of the performing arts, like just dance? And if so, well, how do you get in them? Is it an audition? Or is it, I mean, I'd like to know the listings as well, because I had the opportunity to come across a young man who's a champion dancer, was in Italy. But he has two problems. One, he's 19, a little bit on the older side. And the second is his parents haven't been able to effectuate a high school that would meet his talents. He's supposed to be astounding. I haven't seen him dance. So can we have listings with criteria for our judicial districts? This young man lives in Brooklyn, of course, and how, if it's an audition, then fine, but what's the process for us getting an expeditious audition or getting him in a school that would tap on his talents?
You only need to go to the cities on that. There are no other.
Yeah, it's
You mean the DOE?
No, yeah, in other words, there are no other programs specifically for one art or another. There's one regional high school on Long Island. The rest are all in cities.
right.
Have them, so you only need to case the cities.
But you'd be able to get me that information?
Yes, we can
And-
provide you with
And
that.
maybe we could arrange, to have an audition or help me with it so I can help the parents.
Okay, thank you, Regent Cashin. We have Regent Finn, and then late entry, Vice Chancellor, Regent.
Thank you, Madam Chancellor.
So, Regent Finn, you're next, and then we're going to have Vice Chancellor, Regent Hackinson, Regent Johnson, and closing with Regent Hillis. And I thought for the first time since I've been sitting here, we were going to be on time. I guess not.
Well, I'll be short. Thank you, Chancellor. You know, I'm convinced if there's anything that's going to save man's soul, it's got to be the arts. It's the only thing that I can see. A universal language. I have to echo what Regent Young said. It certainly saved me from being bored senseless in school. What I'm concerned about is, any mandate, if it's not funded, it's done. And in the climate that we're living in now, the arts, I'm afraid, will be decimated if New York doesn't come up with its own creative solution. So I'm hoping that we will really be creative when it comes to working with organizations, foundations, and so forth. I see you have a mention of that in the material. You did not miss it. But I think we really have to take that very seriously and aggressively go after funds. I don't know if you're going to speak more on that. So that these things can be available for our kids. Thank you.
Great point. Regent, Vice Chancellor.
I too applaud staff with advancing the importance of arts and curriculum and education. The one thing that concerns me, and I know that it concerns all of us or should, Regent Tillis, you spoke to this, you spoke to it well and pointedly, but I do think it's worth highlighting again. Angelica, you spoke of the mission, which I think is a good one, and within that includes reference to all students graduate as artistically literate citizens. And then you spoke of the vision, and that included the first line, all New York State P-12 students are provided with access to learning in dance, music, theater, visual and media arts, delivered by certified teachers. That is admirable, but I'm concerned that it may not be applied to all schools and all students in all places. And we talk about the 4+1 for the benefit of all students, but to this point it really has not been for the benefit of all students. And we talk about the arts, it's certainly a lot easier to see availability and opportunity within the large urban areas. I'm concerned about the rural areas and other parts of the state that have that are higher need, being able to fund the arts in the way that we're defining it. And it doesn't take away from the vision and thinking that it's well stated. I'm just concerned with the realities. And I want to make sure that we continue to look at making this available to all students in all places. Because if not, then I don't know that we are doing the service that we think we are doing. If it only becomes available to the few as opposed to all.
Thank you, Vice Chancellor. Regent Hackinson.
The only thing that I have to add to my esteemed colleagues and to the exceptional introduction that you gave to us is what Regent Young said about access. As we are determined to codify this strand or this graduation appeal, we have to remember, I think, that we gain access and people feel comfortable, that we experience the comfort level. We can't take that away by regimenting it. And that's all I have to offer.
Thank you. Next, we have Regent Collins and Regent Johnson. Regent Collins?
Okay, I wanted to ask if Angelica can include, if Angelica can include with her summary chart of the various schools in the various districts that have performing arts schools, if you could ask if they have any plans to develop a performing arts school. That would give us some foresight on what's coming down the pike, because in Buffalo we're going to add a performing arts school at one of our early childhood centers. That would be a feeder into our what we call our regional performing arts school. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Regent Johnson?
I too want to commend all the work that has been done on the arts. And, we often develop policies that have school districts groaning. Here they go again telling us what to do. I think this is the one time we will not experience that. I think that the notion of the arts, as my colleague said, as a universal language is really important. What people will groan about is how do we fund this? And I think we need to figure out how to make sure that happens. We've talked a lot about the performance, but we also want every single student to be a consumer of the arts. So just a humorous aside, I did study dance with Carmen de Lavalade and Jeffrey Holder. You would never want to see me on a stage. But I am a consumer of the arts, of all the arts. And I think that's the importance of the arts, and that is to recognize it's a universal language and it's a glue that binds us together. So in the midst of so much controversy in New York State around so many of our goals and practices, this is the one area where I think we could actually bring all of our school districts together if we could figure out how to help them support this effort. So great work, Roger and the team up front, and let's make this possible a very high priority for the budget process.
Okay, and I am going to ask Regent Tillis to close, and then keeping in mind that this is an action item, so Regent Tillis?
Yeah, several comments in regard to some other comments that have come up. Relating to the last couple of comments, the arts can no longer be the bastard stepchild of education. And I think the whole concept of selling to the public and to our boards and everybody else that this is an equal part of education and not just an add-on, which so many of our people still believe. As an example, when I have gone with Midori, one of our great artists, who runs a wonderful arts program in the New York City schools, and she does presentation about what is art and when, and the kids are so excited, 3rd and 4th grade kids. And then I would stay after with the principal of the school. And I said, this is so great, what kind of follow-up do you have? And the principal looks at me with a blank stare, like, we don't have an art or a music teacher here in the school. I said, but you have discretionary money. Yeah, but we have to put it on the English and math tests, because that's what people want. In some ways, inadvertently, the Regents' policies, or the state policies coming from across the street, have created a situation where the arts have become a bastard stepchild. Because of the emphasis that we've put on 3 through 8 testing. And that's really unfortunate, because I think even if we're looking at 3 through 8 testing as being a be-all and end-all, the arts are the one thing that will get people there, and not the second period of English and the second period of math. And yet, that's the experience that I find out there, even on the best, or highest needs or lowest needs districts, is that seems to be the case. We have to do the job, we meaning the state ed and the regents, in making sure people realize that there's more than that the arts are at least equal, if not more. Secondly, we're going to need new teachers. The arts don't have the amount of teachers that we're going to need, even if we do it on a shared teacher basis, because we're really adding. So many teachers have been displaced in the arts over the last several years, that, and who might have retired or gone someplace else, but we're going to need to backfill those places. And like other career paths that we've talked about, I think we're going to need to have some special encouragement for teachers of the arts, practitioners of the arts, to come and teach the arts by having accelerated programs, etc. I think we're going to need that. In terms of diversity, I know that we made every effort, and I think we've done well with the diversity on the Blue Ribbon Commission. We specifically looked at ethnic diversity, geographic diversity, etc. And I think you'll see when you see the list of people that is the case. And next, we are under attack for the same reasons perhaps that our insistence upon math and English and maybe STEM subjects at both the state and the federal level. When the president talks about eliminating the National Endowment for the Arts, it becomes tremendously problematic, and the Endowment for the Humanities. In addition, we have, as a priority for several years now, asked the legislature to fund a Museum Education Act, which would make a partner of those museums in terms of education, cultural education. And it's in our request again this year. I don't think they know yet what's going to be happening. And lastly, in talking about diversity, I've been very fortunate to get to know Yo-Yo Ma. And Yo-Yo Ma has an amazing sense, not just his own performance, but the Silk Road Ensemble that he has, which is world music. It comes from every place. And the instruments come from the entire world, and he uses them. Without Yo-Yo Ma's name on it, the Silk Road Ensemble would not be going very far. But when he is with them, he gets thousands and thousands and thousands of people. He has been aware of our Blue Ribbon Commission for the Arts and is reviewing it as we go along, and hopefully will be reviewing the final draft of it when we go, because I think he has a better sense of world music and the use of music for cultural purposes than anybody I know. So hopefully he and several other artists have expressed interest in supporting this. And we're going to need all the support we can get from people who are outstanding in their fields, because we need their support, and I think we will get their support. There are others as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to conclude by saying two things, that as we move forward, any standards that we bring before you have cultural responsiveness embedded in them. I want to reassure you that that is the framework around all the work that we're doing. Accommodations are clearly in this plan. We've been very thoughtful to make sure that we include them in, and that's why we stress the importance of the professional development, because there are places where there isn't diversity, and and we need to bring it and present it. So I wanted to reassure everyone that you're not going to see anything coming from us that doesn't have that embedded moving forward. And I would be remiss not to, I know that Regent Tillis acknowledged, but I want to acknowledge Leslie Yolen, because she's doing this single-handedly. When we talk about lack of resources, we're talking about one person.
Stand up, Leslie.
Thank you. Angelica, you are correct in terms of the whole notion of cultural equity as a theme throughout this piece. And before we obviously take up the action item, I know that as I was sitting here, I was thinking of Thoreau, who says the world is a canvas for our imagination. So thank you so much. So this is an action item. Do I have a motion for the approval of the plan?
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, we've got about 5 seconds. And actually, we do have about 5 seconds. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? By the way, part of all of this, all in favor, all opposed, thank you, the motion carries. And before we adjourn, just keep in mind, as we go through the next 2 days, and more importantly, through the next 2 years, the next 10 years, let the issue of a sense of humor carry us, because without that, we will take things too seriously, and it's important for all of us as we go through these challenging times to remember that there's nothing greater we can laugh at ourselves. Thank you. We stand adjourned.